This is Regin's Travels podcast. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Regin's Travels podcast. This is your host, Regin. And today, joining us is Lois Yasay Ribeiro. Tama ba yung pagka-pronounce ko? Ribeiro.
Yeah, tama.
Lois Yasay Ribeiro. She is a former travel blogger, a surfer, a writer, a woman full of passion. In 2011, she quit her corporate job to travel full-time together with her colleague. They ended up traveling extensively in India and Southeast Asia for 6 months while running the then travel blog We Are Soul Sisters. Lois, welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Hi, Regine. Finally, we're speaking.
Yes.
Face to face.
Face to face. It's like I remember seeing your travel blog for the first time way back in 2011. So that was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Feels
Wow.
like a past life.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it feels so fast as well. It seems like it's just yesterday when I stumbled upon your blog. But think about it, that was already 10 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, so many things have changed.
Right. So what are you up to? How are you there in Portugal?
Well, it's starting to be sunny here. Summer is starting. I've actually always been like moving back and forth between France and Portugal. So now I'm kind of feeling like this is, a good place for us as a family, since I already have a family. I have a daughter now. And I think with COVID, like things have been a bit slower, making plans, um, coming up with ideas for a business, or even like taking further studies. They've been, a bit slow in the making. So yeah, that's kind of my recap of my life here in Portugal.
Yeah, it's really good seeing you settle down, in another country and with your daughter and your husband. And I saw your pictures. You're so still that passionate woman, but this time settled and still doing your passions like surfing and writing.
Yeah. Yeah, during the pandemic, at least we were able to surf. We're not very far from the beach, which is wonderful. I think we moved to Portugal mainly for that. I used to surf a lot in the Philippines, so that's why, it's wonderful to be still close to the beach. Yeah.
Where in the Philippines do you surf though?
I started surfing in Zambales. Are you familiar with that place?
Oh, there's a surfing area there. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's quite getting popular now. But then I moved to Baler. Actually, that's already after I did the 6-month backpacking trip all over Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And I decided to move to Baler. I think I lived there for about a year. I was managing a guest house of a friend there. So, after quitting your corporate life, you have to kind of assess, like, am I gonna go back to being in the office, or am I just gonna, live the kind of life I really want? So that was
Right.
the decision I had to make.
Popular nowadays in the Philippines in terms of surfing is Siargao. Were you able to surf there as well?
Yeah, me and my husband, we weren't married at that time. We spent around a month or two in Siargao. Was
Oh.
really a really wonderful, memory. We surf almost every day, and I think Siargao, from what I've seen recently, it's really coming up. Like, so many places are opening. A lot of people are actually moving there from Manila. I don't
Right,
know if
right.
you've heard of that. So I think, especially with COVID, people are starting to realize, like, they would rather not be living in the city anymore.
Yeah, and I heard there's a lot of celebrities as well who are actually moving there and focusing on just vlogging, that kind of
Yeah,
lifestyle.
I think you're talking about Andy Eigenman, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I think she first was in Baler, and then she moved to Siargao. I think
Mm,
she's now with a guy who's from Siargao, and it's a great place to have a family as well. You're out of the city, you have more space. Like, a lot of people realize, living in an apartment isn't really all that that good. Especially when you have to stay indoors during the lockdown. I don't know. Is it still lockdown there in the Philippines?
No, it's
Or
not anymore. But some province, some cities, they're still. I know a lot of term. I'm not even sure of the term anymore. Like ECQ or I don't know, like
whatever alphabet.
MECQ. Yeah, community quarantine basically. So it's not yet totally free, but at the same time, it's not locked down anymore.
Oh, that's great. That's really good.
Mm. So you in 2011, you quit your job and traveled full time. What made you decide to do this major decision of yours?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, I was working in training and development for a bank, and I really enjoyed my job. I was also like speaking with people face to face. There was a lot of interaction, and career wise, I think I was in a good path. But I think there was something inside of me that really needed to see more of the world. You probably could relate to this with your around the world travel. And I guess that thing inside of you just keeps on nagging you until you have to kind of take the leap, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel the same as well when you did your trip?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And one of the things that influenced me to do that as well, because I actually quit my job as well when upon doing
Oh, I didn't know that.
this round the world trip. Yeah, I quit my job because I couldn't find the time to do long term travel, obviously, and working in a school. So I also quit my job. And one of the one of the influencers, or one of those who influenced me to do this, there are lots of factors, but you're one of those. Like
Oh,
you and
thank
Chichi, we are soul sisters blog. And especially during the time, I remember 2011, I was still working in Thailand, and that was the time where I think that the travel bug caught me. I was so into travel, passionate about traveling. That was the start of, especially the backpacking style of travel. And I
yeah.
remember working in a school, and during my break, I'm supposed to kind of like, for example, check test papers, kind of stuff, or prepare for the next lesson, but ended up browsing my laptop and looking at your photos
I
because
can relate to
during the time you were traveling, you were on the road,
that.
you and
Okay.
your colleague Chichi, and I was like, oh wow, I was so jealous, and you were so vocal about quitting your job to travel and finding your passion, doing what you love. And I told myself that someday I'm gonna do it as well. But I just didn't have the courage to do it. Like coming from our background in the Philippines, especially, and finally was able to do it in 2019. Yeah, so I
Wow.
also quit my job to travel the world. But in your case, like it's a major decision, especially like what I've said for us Filipinos.
Yes.
Because a
Yes.
lot of nationalities do it, I'd say naturally, like it's normal for them. For example, European countries, they even have a gap year, like
Yeah.
the ones from the UK or from Australia. But for us, like we are conditioned to study hard, and then after graduation find a good paying job and get settled or have a secure kind of job. So that is a major decision, especially in the Philippines. So what was the reaction of the ones closest to you?
Well, of course, the first people who showed surprise and very they were very concerned were my parents.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they asked, like, why are you doing this? Aren't you afraid? At that time, of course, I didn't have a child yet. So now thinking back to that, now having a child, the first thing you are concerned with is their safety, right? Because
Right.
when you're traveling, it's really, that's the unknown. Like, so many things can just happen to you. And I think it's also about being a woman. I think if I were not, I mean, if I were a man, my parents would probably be like, "Yeah, go, sure." There's probably less risk. Unfortunately, that is the case, especially since one of the countries we went to, were like, we went to India, we went to a lot of lesser known countries like Laos. So there was definitely a main concern about safety, and also like, what are you doing with your life, basically? Like, if
Exactly.
you're on this track and then you're just off track with just one decision. So so yeah, I think I was already very determined to do the trip when I spoke with my parents. You know what I mean? Before, I was very prepared to tell them, I already bought the tickets, so there was really no going back.
Oh, really? Wow.
Whatever they would have said, I already had everything planned. I had my route, I had my tickets, I already saved the money for the trip, so it was pretty much set. I just needed to have their blessing.
Right. So you mentioned you have this passion for travel, you want to see the world out there, but then
Mhm.
that was a major decision of yours. Did someone influence you to do this, or maybe a movie or a documentary, or like where did it really come from deep down?
I think it came from before I did that backpacking trip. I actually lived in the U.S. for 1 year, and I was working in New York. And in New York, I would meet so many travelers. They would either start their trip there or end their trip there. And so this was my first initiation to like talking about places in Southeast Asia, which is quite amazing to think that I didn't know about Myanmar, I didn't know about Laos until I actually went to the US. I,
Mm.
I never learned about these countries in school, you know what I mean? So I was talking to a lot of travelers, and they were talking about how you can actually travel for cheap, and that was the first time I thought, wow, this is something I can actually do for myself, right? Because as Filipinos, I don't know if you can relate to this, but um we're not really taught that we should just, save money and travel. Am I right? We were doing mostly holidays, right? We would do like a 1 week holiday somewhere.
Definitely, definitely. That's why it's so unheard of, especially during that time, 2000. That was 10 years ago. Now
Yeah.
it's a bit changing because of maybe the influence of social media and all that stuff, the internet. But back then, 2011, that was so unheard of for us Filipinos. We're more of a vacation type of culture,
Yeah.
like short holidays, usually Singapore, Hong Kong, or the US. But then what you did was unheard of, and you, because you wrote about it, so during that time it became really viral.
Yeah, it's funny because now it's nothing new. I'm so glad that so many Filipinos are traveling, and even while I was in France or even here in Portugal, I've met a lot of Filipinos traveling, and they are also exploring lesser known countries, and like doing even backpacking, which is so unheard of 10 years
Hmm.
ago.
Right,
I'm
right.
really happy to see that.
Yeah, prior to this podcast, I was talking to one of the travel bloggers as well, Lindsay Cabildo. And
Okay.
in 2010, when I first got into the backpacking culture, I started searching for Filipino backpackers on the internet because I haven't seen a single backpacker on the backpacker trail in Southeast Asia. So I searched on the internet and I saw her blog post which says Filipino backpackers, where art thou? So this was in
Wow.
2000 and 2010, 2011, somewhere. And nowadays it's really changing. If you go backpacking, you can see at least one or two Filipino backpackers on the road.
Yeah, I think it has changed so much. Um, it's kind of also a way of curiosity because I think Filipinos before we were really more of looking for the luxury travel or being comfortable. I guess like really staying in hotels. Um, but now I think we are getting out of that comfort zone. We're really I mean, even just putting a backpack on, you know how it feels, right? It's really
Yeah.
heavy. You have to
Mm.
carry it a few hours per day, and and I'm so glad that more and more Filipinos or even Asians actually are really doing that, and especially traveling to Europe or even traveling to. Actually, I wish I made it to Latin America, but that was supposed to be next, and I actually didn't make it there. You have been to a few countries, right, in Latin America?
Yeah, just a few countries.
Okay, how was that?
Oh, it's amazing. I really want to go back because the thing is, when I was planning my trip, I really didn't plan it that well. It was kind of like a spur of the moment. I didn't really expect to have an around the world trip during that time. I had this long time. I had this plan a long time ago, but I didn't expect I'm gonna do it that year. It was just very very random. I was just kind of like burnt out on the job, and I was like, okay, I have to do this before I get married, because when I have kids in the future, it's gonna be more difficult. It has
Smart
been
move.
an it has been an ongoing debate ever since. Ever since I had this plan, I was like, should I do this? Because like what you said, it's a huge decision to just quit your job, and especially if you have a job that you really like and the pay is good, it's quite hard to let go of that. But then I was thinking, if I'm not gonna do it now, then it's gonna be more difficult in the future, especially if you're settled and have kids. So I just did it, and the planning wasn't that good, so I ended up just staying for a few days, or yeah, a few days in South America. So but the plan was, after the around the world trip, I want to go back to Brazil because I missed the Christ the Redeemer. Can you imagine? That was one of the main purpose of going there, but I missed it because I just have one day in Rio de Janeiro. So I
Ah.
plan to go back, but
You
then
have,
COVID happened.
you have to travel to see that. Like you can't just like isn't it in that city where you land there and then
Yeah, right. Is in that city, but the thing is, I only have one day for Brazil because of the planning. It was not good, and my ATM didn't work during that time, so I wasn't able to withdraw money from the ATM machine, and my money was just enough. My cash was just enough for airport transfer and food.
yeah.
So I was like, no chance to go there. It was one of the disappointments. So I planned to go back, but then COVID happened.
That's very unfortunate. Actually, since you've mentioned Brazil, after living in Portugal for a few years, I really want to go there. Especially since I can now somehow, have a conversation in Portuguese. And also, like, there's so many ties to the culture. You know that it was a former Portuguese colony.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of Brazilians living here. I've tried a lot of their food. Um, and it's really a place that I want to visit one day.
Yeah, yeah, South America definitely. And
Yeah.
one of the things is the language is so it's interesting to just hear Spanish everywhere,
Yeah, yeah.
And there's some similar Filipino words. I was like, oh
Yeah,
wow, that's one of the interest there.
it's funny that you mentioned that because I was just in Spain, I think a few weeks ago, and it's really amazing because Filipinos can understand Spanish.
Yeah,
There's some, especially if you know Tagalog and Bisaya, which I speak.
mm-hmm.
There's so many words that are the same.
The similar, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like funny when you go from, because we drove from Portugal to Spain, and then you go there and you just land in that country and you're like, oh, I can actually understand what they're saying, and I can understand the signs everywhere. So I
Wow.
think that's a privilege for us as well.
How long have you been there in Portugal already? I think you moved in 2000, in, if I'm not mistaken, 2015
2014.
or
So
14.
altogether, I would already be here, maybe 6 years. But it's just that we move back and forth between France and Portugal.
Mm.
So on this particular move, like we've actually stayed here, it's already been 3 years, which is enough for me to learn the language, enough for me to somehow make some contacts,
Wow.
and have a semblance of home. Because I used to just like have this one piece of luggage, and I would just go back and forth, from Portugal and France. But as you can see, it feels more like home now.
Great, great. Yeah, I really want to visit Portugal. I've been there, but just at the airport,
Oh
Lisbon,
no, in Lisbon, you didn't even get it out.
just for a layover.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, hopefully after COVID,
Yeah, but
like,
one of my major travel projects as well after this around the world is because I love trains. I plan to take the longest train route.
oh wow, it's
Get
amazing.
Guess from which country?
What is that the one from Russia to Asia or something like that?
No,
No.
no,
Or
not really. It's that's part of it, but it's
okay,
actually starts from Saigon. Can you imagine Saigon in Vietnam,
to Europe?
going all the way to Porto?
No. Yeah,
Right.
I
That's
actually read about that.
right.
It's the
That's
longest. Yeah, it is the
the
longest
longest.
connected railway in the
Right.
world.
Right. So
That's
that
amazing.
was
Okay,
the plan.
once you do that, I'll welcome you to Porto. I'll have like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
and a welcoming party for you.
It's gonna be amazing. Imagine like passing by Europe and China, Mongolia, Russia,
That,
Southeast Asia. So
that's wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah, it's also great to actually be here as a Filipino in Portugal because we don't realize it, but there's so many similarities. The Filipinos have to the Portuguese. Well, first
really.
of all, you probably knew that Magellan was Portuguese, right? Did you
Yeah.
know that? Yeah, okay, at least you knew that. But for example, Portuguese people eat a lot of rice, which is not as
Wow.
common. Like they basically eat it with every meal, which is not the same as in
Yeah,
any
in
other
European,
European country.
right.
Because if you
That's
go to
interesting.
Spain, they don't even eat rice that much
No,
unless
no.
you're eating paella.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one. Of course, they eat a lot of meat. They eat a lot of pork. They're Catholic, very Catholic, very religious, very family oriented. So actually, Filipinos will feel right at home in
Wow.
Portugal. Yeah.
I remember when I was in Spain, we were there for 10 days for a concert tour by choir before, and our host family didn't serve rice at all for 10 days. And this was during when I was still my first time traveling to Europe. So I wasn't yet used to not eating rice.
Mhm.
And imagine 10 days without rice. So we felt weak because for us in the Philippines, if you don't eat rice, it's just like a snack, right? And I wasn't yet used to having that kind of lifestyle. So we always say arroz, arroz, mas arroz, something like that. That's interesting. In Portugal, they
Probably
eat a
said
lot
like,
of rice.
why are you asking for arroz? There's no paella. Like
Yeah.
the only dish mainly that they eat with arroz.
And the only time we had rice was like what you said when they served paella. And yeah, that was quite a sacrifice back then. But now I'm used to it, living in China.
Sorry, you're used to.
Not having rice, like not really eating rice for meals. All right. So when you were about to quit your job in 2011, it's like what I've said, it's a major decision. What are those hesitations, or do you have any hesitations, or am I really gonna do this or not? It's a you're like what you've said, you're enjoying your job in Manila and the pay is good. So what were those hesitations, or maybe are there some hesitations in doing this?
I think the biggest challenge would be the financial side of it because even though I've saved money, me and my friend have saved money, but how long is that going to last you, really? Right? So that was always the question. And of course, everything has to end. There has to be, that last flight back home. So what are you going to do after that?
Wow.
That's always the question. So I think it was more of just accepting that it is a very very big risk. Like somehow you could think it's a career. What do you call that? Like career suicide? I don't know if you're even allowed to say that you're basically destroying your career
Right.
because what kind of employer would accept you for a job after seeing your resume, not doing anything for months, and they're gonna be like, what did you do in this period? And so you're just gonna tell me I basically just traveled the world, like what you did. I don't know how you did, how you got over that, how you overcame that actually.
But do you have plans like after this trip? Do you had plans of kind of like a plan B, or okay, I'm
Mm,
gonna I'm gonna travel, I'm gonna enjoy, but after that I'm gonna go back and what's next? Do you have like a plan in mind after that? Or are you
no.
just like, okay, just leave my job and let's just face whatever happens, kind of that thing.
Yeah, it was exactly like that. There was no plan B, there was no backup.
Wow.
And yeah, I think because if you're I was 29 at that time, and I was really just living my life for myself. And it's wonderful to have done that, to be able to do that with no responsibility, of course, at that time. So so yeah, I think after I came back, the funny thing is I had to actually like go for job interviews within like a month or two coming back from that Southeast Asian trip, and I was like, what am I gonna wear? I was like this Lao tubing t-shirt or these shorts.
Fisherman pants.
Because we basically sold everything we owned, and that was all that we had on our backpack. So coming
Right.
back to the Philippines, yeah, it was a new life.
Wow. And you wrote on your blog as well, you said, "This is what I believe. Don't be afraid that something happens to you. Be afraid that nothing happens to you." And then he said, "Nothing noteworthy or exciting or breathtaking. I'm more afraid of a life where nothing extraordinary ever happens. I am more afraid of putting my dreams on a shelf and later realizing that I'm too jaded or too tired to live them."
That
Wow.
makes me a bit teary. It's amazing to hear that being read back to you. It's almost like I heard that from my former self from a decade ago.
Right, that was 10 years ago. So what are your thoughts regarding when you wrote this one and now 10 years have passed and life has changed? What are your thoughts on this?
If I were speaking to my former self, I would say, well done. You know, like I'm so glad you did that. I'm so happy that I took that chance to really see the world and that would probably be the only time in my life where I had full control of everything, of myself, of everything that happened to my day. There's so much freedom in being able to do that, especially now since I have a family. I'm not saying it's the end of end of the world, but realistically, having a family, having a child, it's a really big responsibility. I have to admit that it's a choice. There are places you can't go anymore. There are trips you can't do anymore. There's a lot of things you can't do, just because you're already thinking of other people. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to have done that 10 years ago.
Wow, that's really good to hear that you don't have any regrets of doing it in spite of, you know, not having a secure job or not having a monthly paycheck for months, but you don't have any regrets. And you said that you were 29 when you did it. In fact, I've read a lot of advice from people who was able to do it as well, that they say in your 20s don't save, because it's like a contrary to what we were conditioned to do as Filipinos, like study hard, graduate, get a nice paying job, and save and save and save, so that when you retire, you can travel or you can basically, I don't know, like enjoy your retirement. But then there are lots of advice as well out there that says in your 20s, do not save, but enjoy or do the things that you love, like travel, find your passion, and then save later on, because during this period of your life you have the energy, and and time passes and it does not return. So while you still have the time and the energy, then do the things that you love, because if you save, for example, you don't have anything left to do those things, right? So, and you said you were 29 when you did this and you were happy that you did it.
Yeah, that's two different ways of seeing it, I guess. But I would totally agree that our health, our vitality, our energy, it's really it's not gonna go on forever. And when you're able to travel, when you're able to do a lot of things, like even physically, I think it's really the time to do that in your prime, those prime years,
Mm.
because that in itself, your age, your that in itself is a resource.
Mm.
It gets depleted
Right,
eventually.
right.
You don't feel as energetic as you were when you were in your
it's
20s.
non-renewable energy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and when I was deciding to quit my job as well,
Mhm.
yeah, I was working in China. I got the job was good, the pay was good, the compensation, the perks, and everything. But when I was debating whether to quit my job or not, one of the things that really triggered or sparked that told myself, okay, I'm gonna book this, is I saw this quote that says, "Travel because money returns, but time does not." So it's usually it's a kind of like a debate between time and money. So I was like, okay, so time
Yeah.
passes, time does not return, but money returns, but time does not. So I was like, okay, I'll I'll do it now while I'm still at this age and I still have the energy.
Yeah, that's a great realization because before COVID actually hit as well, I was saving money, and I was thinking, I'm saving this money. I'm gonna do more traveling. There's a lot of countries I still want to visit in Europe. Like I've never even been to Austria. I've never been to like all those. What do you call this? Like even Romania. I've always wanted to go to Romania. So because in Europe, the cool thing in Europe is that there's really a lot of flights that are not that expensive, and you can travel to a lot. There's so many options, right?
Ryanair.
Yeah, exactly. And there, when I was living in France, we were not far from Paris, and Paris has so many routes, really cheap routes. Like I used to travel a lot, like just for the weekend to Morocco. I would go to Croatia. That was when I was working, but because I was saving this money, and then suddenly COVID, and we're not traveling already for. I haven't traveled for years actually. I mean, apart from driving to Spain, which is not that far from us. Yeah.
Right, right. So that's exactly the point. Like you never know what might happen. So you have the time, you have the energy. Okay, you're gonna lose some money, you're gonna spend money, but at the same time, you can always earn that. You know, you can always
Yeah,
earn that. So that
the caveat to that though is I really won't advise people to go beyond their means. Like, sure, spend money, travel, do whatever you can, but sometimes we go to people's go to a certain extent when they really have to like borrow money or even put it on their credit card to travel. And I think that's also something we have to think about. Like, don't go broke for
right,
following
right.
your dreams.
Exactly, exactly. That's a good advice there, and I'm glad that you also mentioned that one because like maybe people will think, okay, Lois did it. I'm just gonna keep my job as well. But I think you have to prepare for this as well for this major decision. Probably have enough savings. Enough is relative, but at least you should have enough savings to kind of sustain you for a few months.
Yeah, exactly. And also a buffer as well. Like you need to have a certain percentage of your savings where you say, I'm not going to touch this money because when I have to go back, at least I have a little bit of funds to start again.
Looking back at that epic backpacking trip, 6 months in Southeast Asia, and personally, Southeast Asia is one of my favorite travel destinations, especially in terms of backpacking. The Banana Pancake Trail, the
Yeah.
well-trodden trail in Southeast Asia. So looking back at your trip, 6 months, that was long. So what were the memorable moments, and how do you feel when you were doing that trip?
Wow. There were so many memorable moments, but I think one of the countries I really liked was Myanmar. I don't know if you did you visit Myanmar?
I visited Myanmar when they just opened, but you visited it before they even opened.
Yeah, before they even opened, which made the experience extra special because we were surprised that they actually granted us visas.
Right,
And
right.
we were travel bloggers, so actually we were not even supposed to enter Myanmar at that time. They were not open to any journalists or any people who would report on what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in that country because it was still closed. But we met a few backpackers. We traveled as a group, and we didn't feel unsafe, even though at that time Myanmar was still, from the news, of course, there were still some bombings. There was a lot of civil unrest, which is happening again, as you know, right?
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah, the military seized control again of the country. So at that time, they were still starting to work towards democracy. And it was amazing because they were just the nicest people I've seen. The landscape, like so much poverty, but like golden pagodas everywhere. So it was really quite a unique experience.
Yeah, I
So
visited Myanmar in 2012 as well, and I think that was the year when they first opened because you went in 2011.
mhm.
So although they already opened, but at the same time they just opened, so I still kind of like felt the like the Myanmar of old, like isolated from the outside world. But then in 2017 I visited again, and
Oh,
and the change was like it's like a new country. So I'm just
I
glad I was able to do it in
imagine.
2012. It's kind of sad at the same time mixed feelings because they're improving in a way, but I miss the old Myanmar where it's so untouched and raw. But now it's kind of like Thailand is touristy and there are even scammers nowadays. Before it's like there are no scammers.
Mhm.
People are so nice. Although they're still nice, but as most tourist areas are, you have these touts, scammers, but at the same time, yeah, at least they're improving. But how many years have passed? But there was like a huge change.
I can totally imagine. I have not seen Myanmar again since 2011, but at that time it was already in the brink of opening. So you can really already imagine like, wow, this place would totally change. Like there were very few cafes, very few hostels. In some places we visited, there was only one place to host foreigners. So it was very pristine, and people were very authentic as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure they still are. They're just one of the most wonderful people I've ever met, especially since as a country they've gone through so much. You know what I mean? Like they have really seen a lot of unrest, a lot of corruption, and they were just so zen. They were so calm. They really accepted. It's really funny because they accepted everything.
Yeah.
Maybe due to their religion. I don't know if that was how you felt about it as well. Buddhism, right?
Yeah, Buddhism. So probably you mentioned Zen. Zen is like a Buddhist concept.
Yeah. So yeah, they were very accepting of that, and they were just so kind. I remember we met a group of five girls. They were from college, and they befriended us, me and my friend. And they asked us to eat with them, so we were eating together and we couldn't really interact so much, but we tried to do our best to speak, between Burmese and English. But in the end they paid for our meal and I was like, no,
Wow.
it should be our it should be our treat. But no, they said, no, 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 we'll pay for you. And it was really in like a very rural area. And then after that, to think that they were already very generous, they knew we were leaving on a boat the day after, and they met us on the dock, and they gave us some little gifts for food, like little snacks to.
Wow. Yeah, these locals sometimes especially those locals from these, let's say, developing countries, sometimes they're like the nicest, the most kind that I've encountered, like Myanmar.
Yeah, and they're just happy to be with you. Like they're not asking for anything.
And you even try the local costume, longji, and
Yeah, yeah, the little it's like
yeah,
a skirt and then the tanaka.
and the Tanaka, the sunglass
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Oh,
so yeah, it was a wonderful adventure, like seeing your photos. And how about Laos? What are your thoughts of, because that's one of my favorite countries to travel to.
I really love Laos as well. Actually, that would be a close second for me. I wish I had spent more time there. I think I only was granted 14 days in Laos, but it was very pristine as well. There's very little development. It's really a place where if you want to drop out of the face of the earth, like
Oh
just
yeah,
go.
yeah, definitely, definitely. There are no McDonald's, no
Nothing.
no Starbucks.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't really actually like was the tubing, because at that time the tubing was still open. You know
What
the
was still crazy? That was still crazy.
Did you try that?
Yeah, I tried it, but it was already, they already kind of like
We're closing it, I guess.
yeah, they're still open, but the bars are gone because of the crackdown from the government. That was the issue before because of drugs and too much partying. So I tried
Yeah.
it. It was boring when I tried it, but I was able to. That was one of my bucket lists. That's why I still did it.
Yeah, that's the bucket lists are really interesting because you in your mind, right? Like this is what it's gonna look like, and then you actually experience it. Like for me, for example, it was the what was that thing in Vietnam with the boats? Is it in Saigon? No, is it in Saigon?
I think it's in Da Nang, if I'm not mistaken, or Nha
No,
Trang, something
the
like the,
junk,
the the round boats, right?
the
Are you
junk
talking about?
ships. I'm talking about the
Okay, the Halong. That's in Halong Bay.
Halong Bay.
Yeah.
Did you go there?
No, not yet. That
So
was
I,
also my plan, but I haven't been there.
So
And
in my
Sapa.
mind, it was so beautiful in my mind, like those junk ships, those cliffs, the water was so blue, and then you get there, and actually the boats are nothing like they are in the pictures, and you almost don't see these beautiful junk ships. it's almost like I think you have to pay so much more money to go on those. So the tourist ones are really like not beautiful. The water was not that same color.
Yeah,
There were so many tourists, and it was not really what I expected.
that was co-pp for me, that kind of experience, the beach, Leonardo DiCaprio, that kind of
Yeah,
from the movie. And I was like, I was expecting to be in that kind of paradise, but when I got there I was like, oh wow, it's totally different. So I can relate to your experience as well.
sadly, that's what blogging does. That's what social media does to places.
Right.
It's
And talking about bucket list, I remember writing on your blog 30 before 30.
yeah.
Do you remember that one? So you're 29 and you have these 30 things to accomplish before turning 30. Wow. Like visit the seven continents.
Yeah, I was actually looking at that recently.
And you
Because
deleted
now
it.
I'm like 39, 10 years later, and I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? 39 things before 40. That's like a lot now. Like 29 seems doable. And surprisingly, when I look at the list now, I'm like, we actually did manage to do those things. Like when we were starting the blog, we were like, oh, let's aim for getting interviewed on TV at the
Yeah.
end of the trip,
Yeah.
publishing an article in a magazine, the Halong Bay, of course, or even like making 1 million hits on the blog, which were very, if you think of it now, it's kind of shallow, but
Right,
it
but
was,
back then it was like they're huge. I saw them, 10 years ago. I was like, wow, it's a huge task to accomplish these things.
yeah, yeah, it's,
But
yeah,
now it's like, okay, those are kind
yeah,
of
we
just
did.
doable.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I probably wouldn't fall into the trap of doing lists anymore because it's like, okay, I checked that.
Yeah.
And when you think of it, for example, like one of the things was see sunset in Angkor Wat.
Yeah.
And what happened to us that day, we were on our bikes and we both had flat tires. So we didn't even manage to go to the sunset point. So
Wow.
there are things, and you only have one day in
Right.
Cambodia, in, is
Siem
that, no,
Reap.
in
Siem
Siem Reap.
Reap. Mm.
In Siem Reap. So you only have one day, so that you missed your sunset opportunity.
Ah,
But
you
there,
had lots of misadventures as well.
yeah, yeah,
And you mentioned kind of like changing from being glam packers, living the life in Manila, having coffee, Starbucks coffee every day, to sacrificing those things just to be able to backpack or travel 6 months, and then your term was poor packers,
it's
and
funny
and you,
to think.
and you were so proud of it, and I was like, wow. And to be honest, because of that, I exchanged my jeans to fisherman pants as well whenever I travel, because of those, like, you have to kind of look like the typical backpacker in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it really helps a lot, right? If you think of it, you're avoiding a lot of scammers. You look like a local, so people will think twice before they try to sell you
Right.
something. And I actually learned to speak some of the, a few words that would somehow make people think that I spoke Thai. Like, of course, sawadee ka, the usual,
Same,
or even
same.
the numbers like nung song sam si ha.
Oh wow, you still remember.
Yeah, yeah, there's things you don't forget actually. So
Wow.
I'm really looking forward to going back to Southeast Asia. It's just, I mean, a decade later, or even a few years from now, I would really love, and I would love to go backpacking with my daughter as well.
I also remember writing a something about your daughter even before she was born on your travel blog before, kind of
I,
like,
I don't remember that one.
really, like, I think you were pregnant at the time, and
Ah, okay,
and you
okay.
wrote something, and it's kind of related to travel as well.
It was an article. I don't remember exactly. So it was addressed to my daughter, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was addressed to your daughter, but you were still pregnant, I guess, during that time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's an article on your blog or just a Facebook post, but something you wrote something about, to your daughter when she was still inside, kind of like a message to her.
Ah, yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's going to be a traveler. She's already a surfer. And, it's amazing to be able to talk about those places with her, because actually we discovered that I was pregnant in Thailand, which is, Imagine the doctor doesn't speak English, so it's already an adventure in itself. And then after we moved to Indonesia, and then I gave birth to her in the Philippines. So she has a very strong attachment to the Philippines. So
Wow.
she
So
already went on
you
an
were still
adventure.
traveling during that time.
Yeah, yeah, actually. It was actually Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and then just going back to the Philippines to give birth.
Oh, oh yeah, 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 yeah. I remember.
Yeah. And when she was 2 months old, we already moved to France. So she's already been
Wow.
to so many places.
Yeah, right, right. And
Yeah.
your favorite place in Southeast Asia was Pai. I think that was where was that the place where you finally discovered that you were pregnant? Was that in Pai, Thailand,
Yeah,
or
we were living in Chiang Mai,
in
but
Chiang Mai? Yeah.
we were actually we went to Pai. We went to Pai.
Oh, Pai
Yes.
is amazing. I love Pai.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What was your experience?
It was just a relaxing trip because that was after our class backpacking trip. We went to Cambodia and it was quite hectic because I was the one who organized the trip. So after that major trip, I was like, I want to unwind and just go to the mountains. So I went to Pai and met a lot of cool because it's like a backpacker hub as well, and lots of quaint cafes where you can just
Yeah.
relax, and it's amidst nature. But at the same time, it's not boring because there's this backpacker vibe. So a lot of international people as well. So I just love the place.
There's so many things to do as well. We drove a lot on the motorbike because there's this like trail that's like hairpin curves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what else did we do there? There's really just like so many things. There was even like a forest experience. You could go to the forest and
Yeah, you can
like
go
there's
hiking.
survival even.
You can visit the tribes, although some are touristy, too touristy tours. But yeah, it's becoming touristy during the time when I visited. But Pai is like what you've said, it's an amazing place.
Yeah, I agree.
And I remember you were dancing Americano. Was that Americano called like the dance move all over Southeast Asia, and you would film it. This was even before YouTube was popular, you know. So you were making these videos.
A lot of people thought it was actually a very original idea, but at that time, a lot of backpackers, I don't know why, a lot of backpackers were doing the same thing. They were doing this like famous dance. And so we just thought of, oh, why don't we do that everywhere we go? We'll just start filming it. It was actually my friend's idea. It was not my idea. And we just got people to join us everywhere we would go.
That
And
was
people,
so cool though.
yeah, people found it so fun because it even though you don't speak the same language, it's like movement dance is like a language in itself. So it was fun.
Yeah, at first I thought it was like an original music of yours as well, but then I found out that it's actually a popular song during that time.
Yeah, one actually part of it was in Myanmar. It was very interesting because there was a movie being filmed in one of those temples in Bagan.
Mm.
I'm still remembering the names of these places. So they were shooting a film, and we decided to shoot our own video beside them. So we were doing like the Americana moves. So they were looking at us like, what are they doing? And we were just like having fun. And some people even joined. So some Burmese people joined. So it was really cool. Most of it was actually in Myanmar.
Yeah, yeah. Usually at the temples of Bagan, and probably in some in Yangon as well. But that was cool. I really like it during that time.
Yeah.
That was an epic trip. And then after your 6 month travel, you know, you quit your job. So how was life after that?
Hmm.
You know,
How was life after that? Yeah, I think it's been an adventure as well. Because there's two things you can do, right? You do a very big trip and then you come back and then you can just be the same person you were. So just go back, like kind of ask for the same job, go back, sit in that office and, have the same friends and live in your bubble. And then there's that other side where you're just like, okay, I'm just going to live life where I don't know where I'm going next, but it's going to be fun. So, of course, there's also that big fear of where's the next paycheck going to come from?
yeah.
And I guess the solution that I found to that was I decided to live in Baler in a seaside town. And I just got the opportunity from a friend. They opened a guest house in that place, so I was very lucky. I decided to be a full time surfer, full time kind of traveler, still traveling around the area. But it's really not doable in a city.
Yeah, so you didn't go back to your job anymore, right? After that
No.
backpacking trip.
I actually never have been in a corporate job for since then. Probably once in Paris. I did try when I was living in Paris. Um, I was working as a social media consultant and also doing content, which we were already learning while we were blogging, right? When
Mm.
you're doing blogging, you're learning about social media, which was still new back then. You're doing content, you're doing editing, and all those things. So I took a job in Paris for that, but I realized like it's still a box. You're still working at your desk, and it really isn't for me anymore.
Yeah, that's what I say. Like after graduation, actually, the advice is you have to don't go straight to college, or at least have a kind of like some people say a gap year where you work, or just don't go straight to work after graduation. Kind of like just find your passion, kind of thing. Or after high school, don't go to. In some countries, they do this. Like after high school, don't go straight to college, so you can really know what you really want. Or after graduation in college, don't go straight in working. Travel first, and then so you can find what you really want. Because a lot of people nowadays, like they end up in a job that they don't really want, and they end up being miserable. So in your case, did this change how you perceive working in a corporate world? Like, did this epic trip of yours, quitting your job and having this adventure, did this affect your decisions nowadays in terms of work or career?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it made me rethink work. Like work, as you said, how we were programmed, to think about work was you study for a very long time and then you go straight into like OJT, on the job training, and then you do that career for a long long time, like for years, and then you retire basically, right?
Right.
But the way that I started to think about work after that trip was, what can you do that you still enjoy and you're good at doing and make money doing that? And there's no obvious solution, there's no one thing.
Right.
It's still an ongoing thing for me and for a lot of people as
Mm.
well who have been travel blogging. But social media, like my experience, my knowledge of social media has helped me in almost everything that I've tried to do, starting my own business or even presenting myself as a consultant. It has helped me a lot, because every product, every organization needs a social media presence, right? That's still something of great value.
Yeah,
Or
especially
even,
nowadays. Yeah.
yeah, online marketing. Now it's a profession. I never
Right.
imagined. I never, at that time we were just like, yeah, let's just write about blogging, and now travel blogging is officially a profession, or even social media is officially a profession.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, what are the possible ways for, especially for people out there who want to quit their job, and they're not happy with their job and they want to pursue a life of travel? So, what are the possible ways of making money or sustaining a life of travel without being confined in a 9 to 5 job?
Yeah, there's the pre-COVID way, right?
Yeah, like
Like,
talking about, let's say this will apply after this pandemic, because obviously during this pandemic,
yeah,
we don't know what's happening, so it's hard to decide. But like, for say, let's say after this pandemic.
I think it's always about, first, where do you want to go? Because, like for me, I decided I wanted to go to near the beach, and I thought, okay, this is the lifestyle I want. And I had a friend who had a guest house, so I thought, okay, I could do social media for them. I could welcome guests. So looking into what I had to offer and what could be of use to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then after doing that, I moved to Europe. And moving to Europe, it totally changed the game. Like, I don't know French that well. I had to start from scratch. So I lived near Paris, which was very lucky. So I had to think again, like rethink the whole process. And okay, my English is still very valuable. So I was able to do content, I was able to do social media. So going back to the skills that you have. And then after that, I moved to Portugal again. My husband decided we have to move to Portugal. So going back from scratch, not learning the language, and that's when you're basically just kind of really trying to figure out what am I gonna do next. So I was interested in cuisine. I actually started a little like restaurant operation. So yeah, it's it's all about like the place. What do you have inside of you? What do you like to do? And even like following your curiosity as well. Yeah, and I'm curious about your journey as well. Like how has it been for you?
Yeah, in my case, like you mentioned a while ago, there are two path that you're gonna take when you quit your job. Like one is never return, another one is return to your previous job. So the plan, my plan was, since I was the in my case, I it was not that I don't like my job. I just like my job. I just don't find I like my job, but I just don't find the time to do this. So I quit my job, but at the same time, I still like my job. I still like the perks and the stability and all that stuff, the insurance and the security. So my plan was, after traveling, after a round the world trip, I would go back to either apply for another or similar job, or if my company would take me again. So but then fortunately they told me that, okay, you can travel, okay, you can resign, but at the same time, after your trip, you can go back and we're gonna accept you again. So that was a plan.
Sorry, to clarify, this is your job in China?
In
No.
China, this was in China.
Ah, so it's the same teaching job. You're talking about the same teaching job in China. Okay.
Right, the same teaching job in China. So for me, at the same time, even if my previous company won't accept me anymore, I was confident that I had the skills already, the experience, and the certification, so I could easily get accepted in any schools basically. So I was confident that I'm gonna still have a job, or still be secured, still have a paycheck after this trip. So it wasn't a problem. But then COVID happened, so that was the thing. So that's why I'm still here in the Philippines and wasn't able to go back. But if not for COVID, I would still be there and teaching, because I love what I'm doing, and I love the perks that comes with it. So like what you've said, two different paths and two different factors in your decision.
And the great thing about teaching, now that I'm also realizing it, is that you actually get 2 months off, right?
Right, a lot of day off, a lot of like
It's
even during
really
holidays, and they're paid.
exactly because my sister-in-law is actually a teacher as well, at a public school in France, and I was like, wow, that is a very good perk because two months out of an entire year, it's almost like who has that all that vacation time? Like what other profession has that?
Yeah,
I don't know of any other profession.
2 months, Christmas, major holidays. Plus, you sometimes you can even have annual leave, apply for annual leave.
Yeah, and that's the reason actually why I wanted to take my master's. So during the COVID pandemic, I was actually working as a social media consultant for a company based in France. So I was doing it remotely. So I was here in Portugal and I was doing the social media work in
Mm.
France. And I had to stop because of COVID because the company wasn't doing very well.
Right, right.
That's when these things come up and you have to rethink like what can I do? And that's when I thought of taking my master's because teachers get like 2 months off per year. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just gonna be a teacher now. I want to teach literature. I wanna be back in the academia.
Yeah, but that's good. See, because of that major decision of yours, you're able to find your way to doing what you really love. You were
Yeah.
you were into cooking, you were surfing, you were volunteering in hostels. So that what you did was really admirable, because you quit and you didn't come back to that cubicle because you think it's not for you. So you had the courage to do it. So what is your advice then for people who are, a lot of people out there who are miserable in their job, and there are lots of advices as well regarding passion and all that stuff, but then there's this security issue, especially with the pandemic that has happened, so it changed our perspective a bit in terms of jobs and all that stuff. So for this question, what's your advice for people out there who want to pursue their passion of traveling by quitting their day job?
First of all, think think a lot, think many, many times before you really do it. Because it's true, it's not really for everyone. If you find yourself, happy being secure, having a steady job, having a steady paycheck every single month, then stay where just do your holidays, just do your vacations a few times a year. But if you really are 100% that travel, I really want to live a life of travel. I want to discover the world. I want to see things for myself, like not just from books. Um, then make a plan. Like do it very smartly. Don't do it like us. Like don't just like, yeah, I'm gonna do this and then have nothing to go back to. So save up, um, really make a plan, and really look inside yourself. Like if I were to not be able to get a job later on, what can I do? What kind of skills do I have? Like a lot of people actually have become digital nomads. I mean, that is a very big thing right now because people realize that remote work is more necessary now than ever before because of the pandemic. And so there's actually a lot of people who work digitally in Portugal, for example. So a lot of them have clients in the US, have a lot of them have clients in other countries in Europe. And why do they do that? Because the cost of living in Portugal is quite low. I wasn't sure if you were aware of that. Like, for example, in France, if I were to have a meal at a restaurant, it would cost
10
minimum
euro. 10
20
euro.
euros. Yeah, 20 euros minimum. So that is how much in the Philippines. How much is 20 euros? 20
Probably
times six,
times 60, right?
60. 60, right? I'm sorry. I'm so bad. So how much is that?
Like a thousand? 20 times 60, that's like 12, 1,200?
1,200. So in Portugal, you could have a meal at a restaurant for lunch for 5 euros compared to the 20 euros in France, for example.
Wow, wow. I didn't know
And
that. I knew Eastern Europe is cheap. I didn't know Portugal as well.
Portugal is really, and I don't like to say cheap because a lot of people tell me, hey, don't say that it's cheap because actually a lot of people struggle here. The cost of living is very low. Unfortunately, the minimum wage is quite low as well.
Mm.
But in a sense, it
As a
works
tourist, yeah.
as a tourist. It works very well, and
Mm.
also for people who have jobs online, because there's actually a special visa here that if you are making an income elsewhere and you live in this country, you can stay here as a resident. So that's for people who are interested in living in Europe, for example, and are working remotely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard one of the things that you should consider when having that major decision,
Mhm.
life decision, not just traveling the world, but major life decisions that is important to you is if you're afraid, you have to ask the question, what is the worst thing that can happen? Like in your case, for example, I'm going to quit my job. Not going to have this SSS pension, but at the same time, I'm following my passion. This is my dream. Oh, I really want to do this. I know I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have lots of memories. So you have to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that can happen? So in your case, what was the worst thing that happened? Or what is the worst thing that can happen for someone who would do the same?
The worst thing that can happen is you can really run out of money, and running out of money puts you in a very precarious situation. Like, for example, like we were in Myanmar and there was no access to ATMs, and we were very vulnerable because where are you going to stay? How are you going to fund your trip? And thankfully, along the way, even as a woman, there have been people who have been very kind to us, very we actually borrowed money from a friend, an Indonesian friend, while we were in Myanmar. Can you imagine? Like you experienced it as well in Brazil, right? You ran out of money in Brazil.
Yeah, yeah. And I've experienced it in Peru as well, where I cannot withdraw money, and I ended up borrowing money from a friend. They wired money to me. It's quite embarrassing, but
It is. It is embarrassing. And actually, the embarrassment feels like it's gonna kill you more than anything else,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, that's it. That's the question. Like, how worse can it be? And a lot of people can be very scared of not having money, not knowing when the next paycheck is gonna come from. And of course, I wouldn't want to tell people it's gonna be it's gonna be fine all the time. or that money falls from heaven. Like what that we've experienced, that people are going to be kind all the time. But yeah, it is a choice to be able to accept that sometimes things are going to be uncomfortable.
Right. And at the same time, you have to ask yourself, what is the best thing that can happen in following my dreams and following my passion? So, in your case, what was the best thing that happened?
I think the best thing that happened is that I realized what I was really capable of doing. It kind of gives you a sense of accomplishment that you put yourself at the mercy of fate, at the mercy of other people even. And then you're fine. And then your life is so enriched because you really went there and you experienced everything for yourself. You didn't read about it. Nobody, it's not like somebody just told you about it. But like what we're sharing right now, the experience in Myanmar, the experience in Laos, you went there and did that for yourself. And that memory, that experience, nobody can take it away from you. You're gonna be looking at that years from now and you're gonna say, wow, no matter what happens to me, I had those moments of freedom. I had those moments of happiness. And you can always like bring that back to where you are, wherever you are.
Yeah, and you were able to pursue your dreams, and you don't have regrets. Regret is not a good thing. Imagine getting old and having these regrets. I wasn't able to do that one. That epic backpacking trip. So, like, I think that's one of the things to consider. You don't want to live with regrets in not pursuing your dreams as well.
That's something that I've learned later on. I think through traveling and through living in other countries, when I have to make a decision, when I'm faced with a decision, I have to choose between this and this. I always think what scares me the most,
Right.
and then I choose what scares me the most, and I go for that. And I
Wow.
know that I know that a lot of people find that really, really like freaky. Like, why would you do that? Why would you go for the thing that scares you the most? Is because the thing that scares you the most is actually the thing that you really want. Because only the thing that you really want, that really resonates with you, will make you so afraid because it really matters to you, right?
Yeah, yeah. That reminds me of the motto, kind of like motto, if you will, of this very famous influencers or YouTubers right now. Yes Theory, if you know Yes Theory, and their motto is seek discomfort. That is like it's on their T-shirts, their merchandise. That's their motto. So whenever they make decisions or they make plans, they purposely seek discomfort because they believe that through discomfort, that's where you grow.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And a lot of people, the moment that they start to be comfortable, that's when they think like, hey, I think I need to do something with my life. Because when you're too comfortable, I think you're kind of just not growing so much anymore. And I think the pandemic made a lot of us realize that. Like during the pandemic, I was actually in one of our homes in the north. We have this place that's very close to nature, and I was feeling very comfortable. We were very safe. We had food and everything. And then I thought, well, what's next? Like, is this it? I have a family. I'm happy. I have a child. I think I'm living my best life. I get to surf every single day. And then I'm like, I feel like that's not enough for me.
Yeah.
And that's when the discomfort starts, right? That discomfort that makes you think like, I need to do a little bit more. I need to learn more about life. I need to take up another hobby or take up another passion.
Imagine if you didn't take that plunge and you're still in Manila right now working nine
No,
to five. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but in your case, you don't like it. So imagine yourself being in that situation right now for 10 years.
it's it's not a life I would like. But I saw a picture recently of a desk, like those boring desks and those boring computers,
Yeah.
and those like we've all been there, right? Like, and then it was like an ad, like fast-paced company looking for like fast-paced company. Like that's not the life that I want. Like it's better to really be out there in open air, in the sun. And one of the most beautiful quotes that I read. Let me see if I can remember this exactly. Uh, I think it was from Proust, Marcel Proust. He's a very famous writer, and he said, "Always keep a patch of sky above you." And I think that really resonates with me because I feel like the work that I need to do is always has to be outdoors, has to always be this patch of sky, this
Mm.
freedom to be able to choose what I do with my day.
Wow.
And yeah, that's a priority.
Right. And you've met your husband on the road as well when while you were traveling, right?
Yeah. So my husband, Benoit, he's a surfer as well. So after a certain period of time, I realized since surfing is such a big part of my life, I might as well be with somebody who also loves surfing. You know what I mean, right? Like you probably wouldn't date somebody who doesn't like travel. Am I right?
Yes. To our listeners out there, yes.
Like you wouldn't date a glam packer, right? I'm
I,
not.
I don't mind. I don't mind the travel style, but yeah, traveling is a huge part.
Yeah. And the irony in our situation is that when I met my husband, we were like, yeah, let's travel the world, and that ended up to be only 3 countries. And then we already have a baby, and so we had
Yeah.
to move back to Europe. But it's really a wonderful adventure. I'm glad that we decided to move to Europe because it's still it's still new. Everything is new. The language is new. It's like you're still traveling every day.
Yes. Wow. It has been a wonderful conversation with you, Lois, and a lot of I've learned a lot of lessons, and it's really just amazing to be talking to you. Like I've been reading your blogs for like since 2011, and I remember when you posted that Facebook post saying that okay, we're gonna say goodbye to this travel blog. It's not gonna be a travel blog anymore. And then a lot of your readers like, wow, what happened? Like, oh, we missed a travel blog. But then of course we have to move on with our lives and to a different chapter. But then like yeah, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you for sharing as well your stories. I really enjoyed it.
And before we end this podcast, do you have any like final message to our listeners right now regarding quitting your job to travel full time or travel in general?
I think you have to just remember that you only have a very finite time on this world. We never know what's going to happen to us, and it would be really wonderful if you get to live your life the way you really wanna live it, not dictated by any other person. So yeah, if you really want to go for traveling, you just have to go for it and
Wow.
go through the discomfort.
You really have a lot of quotable quotes. So we're going to quote you on that again.
Thank you.
Okay, once again, Lois, thank you for accepting my invitation to be on the podcast and take care. And I hope you have a great day.
Okay. You too. Thank you. Wait lang. Wait lang. Huwag ka muna ulit. Oh, thank you. Ano ba yan?